On. Hi, Bill. How are you? Good to
Good.
see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's a little break in the action, but had a little trip out of the country with my family, and but never lost track of our riveting Seattle Mariners ball club.
Bill Krueger joins us every week now, going to be here on Tuesdays with us. It's brought to you by the Rise Above Foundation. You can visit nativeyouthriseabove.org. You know, it's been so long. I was just saying this before you came back on. It has been so long that we haven't even talked about Servais. We haven't even talked about Jerry Dipoto. I want to first start with Jerry Dipoto, and then we can move to Scott Servais. Were you surprised that they brought him back? And they haven't even announced it yet. But the reporting from Ryan Divish and Adam Jude, surprised that he is coming back for a 10th year.
Well, I the inner workings of the Mariners, Jerry's brought a lot of cred to the table. And he's got a lot of power. I think he's advanced from. If you look at the hierarchy, he's the president of baseball operations as opposed to just being the general manager. That's Justin Hollander's role. So I think obviously he's become he's taken a higher seat in the hierarchy, so to speak. You get the impression that he sits closely with ownership, and he's been there a long time. So I think at this point he has brought a lot of credibility to the table, and he's been able to dodge whatever criticism at this point that the club is taking on, that really that falls to the field level and where they felt Scott Servais came up short.
But and there's no doubt that he's going to be back for a 10th year, that they're going to give him multiple years. No GM or / president of baseball operations. President of baseball operations is going to come back for just 1 year, right? This is going to be a multi-year deal. In your opinion, looking at it from an ownership standpoint, why do you think they ultimately decided to bring him back and say, you know what, your vision, we're good with it, let's move forward with it?
That's really difficult for me to say. I mean, I think they're just lockstep in how they've tried to tackle this plan. I mean, really, what charted the new course is when John Stanton came on board, and that's when really I think the clock started ticking on this new regime, as opposed to looking at Jerry from the beginning of his tenure. So I think that's probably where you have to start looking a little bit more closely at the number of years that John, being the new leader of the ownership group, and Jerry have started their time together. So I think that's kind of where you start to say this is where things really matter, so to speak, not looking at those years when he first took over, when the cupboard was bare and they were bleeding out, trying to get rid of older contracts and become, a younger organization. And then, I mean, you look at the status of things as they sit presently. They're in a difficult, challenging position to try to make the playoffs, and that's the standard that they've set. Mm-hmm. I mean, they had a year where they finished just out of the playoffs. Then the next year they made the playoffs, and then last year just one game out of the playoffs. I think that's what they're kind of looking at for the moment, and where they can build from there. They have obviously a young core they have a young core, Jason. We could talk about that and where we think the club stands presently. But Jerry's part of where they think they're going to move forward in a more successful way. I'm not so sure what else to comment on that.
I want now we get to the decision there with Scott Servais.
Right.
They didn't have they got. I don't know how much it was the fault there of Scott Servais. I mean, I don't know. When we break down his managerial style, I mean, I to me, the guy that's the most important about the baseball team is always going to be the president and the GM, and then it goes down to Scott Servais. We can discuss. I mean, and I know it's old news, and I know people are probably tired of it. I mean, the handling of it wasn't done right, and that's something they can learn from and get better at. You can't. He can't find out via a text message, or not a text message, an alert on his phone. That just can't happen.
Yeah.
But was it his fault? Did they need a new voice? And do you see a change in them since Dan Wilson has taken over the team?
Well, I think, Scott, you're just a victim of circumstance. He had a long tenure position, one of the longer managers in baseball. And, they just, when you set the bar where they set it, and they were 10 games up in June, and they've fallen so hard that it just becomes, it becomes you're the guy that's going to be on the chopping block. That's just how it goes. That's just the nature of the beast. Okay. So we can argue the merits of Scott Servais. I think he's done a very credible job here when you consider what he's been handed. And I think it's just like anything, though, when the club falls so hard, whether you think that the way the club was constituted gave him a real chance to be successful, that maybe he had reached higher than this club could actually go, and that they've come back to the sort of reversion of the mean, because that's just who they are. A club that lacks offensive punch, that maybe perhaps had some holes in the bullpen, which we can discuss. And he's just a victim of circumstance. Now, Dan Wilson, to me, sets up the bar. Granted, he has no experience as a manager. But when you talk about a guy that is, in my opinion, got all the capability of being a great manager and has set the bar so high in regards to the club picking a guy that has such a remarkable, history as a player, and brings all of that back to the table, and hopefully that's something that he can, bring forward to the players, that they now have someone that they could say, wow, this guy has created quite a career and has a real message. And when you bring he and Edgar Martinez to the table, I don't know that you can go any higher in regards to what you can bring to the club. Now, can they flip the team? Can you take an aircraft carrier and spin it on a 180? I don't think you can. That's just not possible. So he's left with what the club has, and we can talk about what he's done. I think what I've seen so far, honestly, he's been more willing to sort of say, look, I think this is what's working for us. Luke really deserves more ABs. We got to get Justin Turner in there every day. Robles has done a great job in the leadoff spot, and if he's not in there, then I'm not going to force J.P. Crawford into the leadoff spot until he gets his game going. And I think he's tried really hard to push starting pitching because he knows he's lacking in the bullpen. And to whether that's worked to their best advantage, I think, you could say, well, there have been some homers that have been given up late, but I think I think Dan is trying to take best advantage of the personnel that he has right now. His club's got holes.
A lot of players, Bill, have praised, what Edgar Martinez has meant to them. It was, last Friday. I think you've got J.P. Crawford talking about, hey, things were overcomplicated, and he's just simplified things. Edgar had some great comments over the weekend. I know they probably touched near and dear to your heart about how I don't care about exit velocity, I don't care about barrel rate. Like, I just average to me, and the simpler stats, right? Those mean more to me just in terms of an indication how somebody is performing. They've all talked about just a simpler approach. I was joking with Jim Duquette about this on yesterday's show. And I look at it all the time when youth coaching, and I think it's the best video in the world for hitters, and it's the Tony Gwynn video, if everyone remembers it, and where he's talking to a bunch, I think it's college kids, about how to hit. And he had two rules. It was be balanced and take the knob to the ball. The knob of the bat to the ball. That was it. That was his whole, he's like, everything else, well, if you do that, the ball's going to go. And I think in this day and age, right, you're a golf fan, there's so much video and information now for golfers and hitters in baseball that I think, and tell me if you agree with this, it can paralyze someone. And maybe that's what was happening, and maybe the greatest teaching tool that Edgar has done is say, look, we're going to pull back on that.
Well, sure. But players are their own coaches. I mean, coaches are there. They're facilitators. You have to open yourself up. And how do you open yourself up at this place in the season? You're going to take the game that you have to the table. You're going to take your routine to the table and do the best you can. Now, maybe there's less this massive amount of information that maybe that's being allowed. The Edgar's allowing the players to say, look, this is a better way to think about where you are today, and try to get a good ball to hit and be on balance and have a game plan when you go to the plate. Okay, well, that's great. But the players are going to be who they are presently, where they are in this season, where they are mechanically, where they are confidence-wise, where they are is just what you're going to see going forward. There's just not enough time to make big changes in someone's approach. I think mentally you can get a refresher from Edgar to say, hey, look, what you just talked about, getting a good ball to hit, being on balance, having a game plan at the plate, maybe building confidence around some things that maybe when you hear it from Edgar and that breeds in you, like, I am a good hitter. And Edgar thinks that this and that and the other thing, and then I can take that to the plate and be successful. Terrific. I mean, it's a case-by-case basis, right? Have we seen a little bit more situational hitting? A little bit more, right, than we have. We've still been stung by the massive strikeouts that have still littered the program. If you look back since Dan arrived, there's still been a 13er, a 14er, a 16er. Those haven't gone away. This club struggles against great pitching, and they've had their way with mediocre pitching, and that's probably true across the board with all clubs. Yeah. But good clubs find a way to hit good pitching, or good clubs find a way to It's such a difficult situation, because if you hit into the count, then maybe you strike out. So let's swing at the first pitch and maybe we'll have success. But if we don't have success at swinging at the first pitch, the starter's still out there with 75 pitches in the seventh inning. Is that good? Good clubs wear starting pitching out. Good clubs hit bad pitching, and good clubs take and try to labor the starter into getting him out of the game. That's what good hitting teams do. They foul pitches off. They make the pitcher work. That's what you want. Not just, hey, let's hit the first pitch. Let's not get into the count and see the nasty stuff. Well, there's two edges to that, for sure. I think as I look at this club, it's the field bet, and then you got Julio Rodriguez. If you want to get down to it, where are we? Well, Julio Rodriguez looks like the same player to me. He's gotten a hitting streak going. He still looks like the same guy. Big swing. He's been able to bleed some balls in, but he's still not the guy you need that stirs the drink. And if he's not, that makes it challenging for this club. Justin Turner's a pro hitter, but he's 39 years old. He's a pro hitter, though. You have a pro hitter in Justin Turner, but the rest of the guys is kind of a ham and egg, right? You're hoping for the right matchup. You're hoping that you find some magic. Robles has got to get back in there because he's given them a lot, right? Rosarina and Julio are kind of the same guy. Rosarina's got a little bit better plan, but they are both swing at everything, right? So it's an interesting mix. I'm talking around the situation. We're still challenged offensively, Jason. What can I tell you? And the superstar player is not hitting. He's slugging 370, and he cobbles hits together, but he's not getting it done.
Bill,
okay?
we could we could rinse and repeat this show for the last 5 years about offensively, right, about what they need to do. And you're right. I mean, a good portion. I mean, a big, huge reason why they struggled so much this year was because of him, because he didn't deliver. He had a terrible season.
Yeah, he just hasn't been the same guy, and he's going to have to regroup and figure it out. He's going to have to figure out what is it that he's going to have to do. I mean, I am not a hitting guru, but I can tell you this, that anybody that looks at him and stops him at the moment that he starts to go forward and sees that bat head in a forward press position is going to say, hey, he's got a long ways to go to get to the ball. He better have lightning in those hands. He better be picking a pitch and then have lightning in his hands, because he's got a long ways to go to get to the ball.
Yeah.
So if he's on time and he happens to start his swing early and gets the pitch that he can handle, sure, like anybody. And he's a very talented guy, but it's not enough to be talented. This team, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of personality there. I mean, Luke really gets after it. Rosarina gets after it. Robles is getting after it. Raleigh gets after it. They got some guys that really get after it, right? They're not a great offensive team. But, and I don't want to jump ahead in the conversation, But the big problem we're having is, yes, do we need to score a few more? Yes. But the big problem is we got no left-hander in the bullpen. We got no right-handed bullet in the bullpen to support Munoz, and that is where we're dying on the vine. And we have young pitching that they're actually trying to nudge a little bit forward, but because they've been so trained to leave it, to throw everything into it for 6 innings, they don't really know how to approach the 7th and the 9th. Because it isn't just rip it at the top of the zone and rip breaking balls. They're losing because they're giving up homers late in games because they don't know what they don't know, which is being able to pitch down and away and understanding where weak contact lives. That's where they're having problems.
Do you get a sense? I've talked about this with Divish. It also brought up with Duquette. I want your 2 cents on this as well, because they find themselves, and it's such a difficult position, Bill, year in and year out, to bring in free agent talent here for hitters. I mean, you've talked about the ballpark. We had that a month ago about the ballpark issues. The travel issues, I think, are a big deal. I know they fly charter and all that, but it's still a grind on these guys. And then where the distance is of just, living up here in Seattle, all of that. They're in ownership and money, and there's just a bunch of factors that go into why they have not been able to sign free agents. It's led people to think that they'll trade one of these pitchers. Castillo's got $72 million remaining on his contract. Now, they could move him. I'm not sure what they're going to get in return, because you're asking that team to take on $72 million and then asking them to also give you a top prospect. I don't know how many teams are going to do that. And then it's going to turn to Logan Gilbert. If they turn around and trade Logan Gilbert for a hitter this offseason, now, as a pitcher, how disappointed would you be in that? Or would you be on board with that?
It's sad, because you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And, we could go back in time, and there's trades that haven't worked in their favor, and they haven't been able to capitalize on having basically Yahtzee, which is 5 premium starting pitchers, a center fielder, a shortstop, a catcher, and a premium young closer. That's Yahtzee. All you got to do is sprinkle around the edges and you win, right? That's all you got to do. But you can't sprinkle with just arms tied behind the back, clipping coupons, waiting for the blue light special at Kmart. I mean, you just can't do that. You can't quite do that. As much as you might like to do that, you can't quite do that. And we've talked about it. We have a young core of really nice looking position players, a Baltimore Oriole-ish group of guys, but where are they? Low A ball. Mm-hmm. Yes, Cole Eberson is now in high A ball, but the other 4-ish are in low A ball. They're not ready to come to where you want them to be, to play this young team, because you have problems getting free agent hitters to come here. So what's the answer? Develop hitters, right? But they're not there yet, and there's a gap. That's a problem. I think I'd hate to see them steal from their strength if they can help it. They shouldn't. They should not. They should They should work a little harder. Sharpen their pencils a little bit more. Take a harder look at the market and try to find guys that are pro hitters. Find guys that can lash the ball in the alley. Find guys that can run. Find guys that aren't necessarily sluggers. We got some of that. If they sign a Rosarina, he's kind of a slugger. Raleigh's a slugger. Julio in his best days, hopefully can be more than just a slugger. But they got a lot of slugging. So what they need is more guys that I think baseball in general is looking for. Guys that can put it in play, that have a pro approach, that don't strike out a whole lot. Everybody's looking for that now, but they don't seem to ever talk about it. But that's what everybody's looking for when you watch baseball. Can they find those kind of hitters that aren't necessarily guys that are going to hit 40 homers and, be the star, that kind of slugging star? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Can you avoid having to make a trade in order to find that guy? Now, I don't know. You start to, I think when you get behind the scenes, you have to say to yourself too, you're looking at this young pitching, right? You got Gilbert. Castillo's probably not tradable. You probably stick with him. And
he's got a he has a no trade clause, but these guys can always waive that.
And Brian Wu is still a mystery. Will he be healthy? And so where does that leave you? It leaves you with Gilbert and Kirby, right?
Yeah.
Now, maybe you say to yourself, well, we're just going to have to talk to both of their representatives and see which one's willing to sign an interim deal that eats a couple of the years of their free agency. And if one of them does, then the other one's maybe the guy that's not going to stick around. And maybe then you think about trading a guy like that. I like them
I don't
both.
want to trade any of them.
Oh,
I don't want to trade any of them. And because I love Yahtzee, even though I lose at Yahtzee all the time to my kids. I love that damn game more than anything, okay? Because all I ever try to do is go for Yahtzee.
Yes.
Maybe I should not. Take the twos. Oh, I need fours. Take fours. But I don't, because I just keep going for Yahtzee and then I lose. I want all of them. And that's what drives me crazy about them. About this whole situation is that it's just like the Seahawks with Russell Wilson.
Right.
They're paying these guys nothing right now. Nothing. And they could just sit there and get all this talent around them, win a World Series, win a championship, and people will love you forever. But now we're talking about trading Logan Gilbert in the offseason to get a bat. And it just,
it just everything they do bites them. I mean, Ty France is over there raking in Cincinnati. And why did we get rid of Ty France? Was he the culprit of doom and gloom here? No, they did it because they were thinking 2 deals ahead, trying to figure out how they could cobble together $1 million to help them so they don't have to stroke a check, right?
Yeah,
because their first base play has not been good. Really just plays hard. Yeah. And Turner's kind of lost over there. And then when we had Lockhart over there, he was terrible. Mm. So, I mean, Ty France can play first. Yeah, he wasn't hitting like he could hit, but he's a pro first baseman. Wouldn't you want to keep him? And if you decided to get rid of him for something, right? If they would have done themselves a favor and just tried to play to their strength a little bit, maybe Jimmy Garcia could have been great and he got hurt, and that's too bad. But they did not have any left-handed pitching. That has cost them at least 5 games, Jason. No left-handed bullet. There were guys out there. Tanner Scott, and AJ Puck. Sure. I'm just naming a couple. You should have you should have said to yourself, we are lacking offensively. We're going to have to just kind of hope that a couple of these guys catch fire. And we'll just win those close games. And we'll ask our starters to get another out or two. But we're so right-handed. And when we see left-handed hitting, and it's a problem. It's a problem. We don't have a left-handed starter. We had 2. Now we have 0. And we didn't have any left-handed relief. If we had left-handed relief, it changes everything. We win 4 or 5 games. Instead of woeing and crying about not being a great offensive team, the problem was left-handed relief and another bullet in the bullpen.
Play to your strengths.
That they could have gotten without having to mortgage the future, without having to. And one of the problems is when you bring guys in and you bring a lot of guys in that are all kind of the same, that destroys chemistry. You need to have someone that's better than everybody else that you bring in. Otherwise, guys are sort of like, well, I'm not playing. And what about this matchup? And why isn't me today? And why is it them? And blah, 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 right? I'm sure that's been there a little bit. This team has pretty good chemistry, but I'm sure sometimes the guys are scratching their heads a little bit, I'm sure. But yeah, they could you get yourself a couple left-handed pitchers at the end.
That's why
you win some games.
Yeah, that's why you're the best. That's why we love having you on. Okay, we do it. Thank you for moving around to a new time. We'll do it for the rest of the baseball season. You're even better on the live version than you were in the recorded version, and it's amazing. And you know what? There are Mariner fans that are watching this, listening to this live. They're going back. They're watching it later this evening, and they're saying to themselves, this is the Bill Krueger I love, and this is the Bill Krueger we deserve, and it's all brought to you by Rise Above Foundation. All right, we'll cut you loose. Go get back there to your regular job, and we appreciate the visit.
I enjoyed it, Jason. Glad we could do this live. Exciting.
Yeah, there he is, Bill Krueger, who will join us every single Tuesday talking Mariners baseball, huh? How about that Bill Krueger Unplugged?